I teach a high intermediate and advanced ESL class. It includes a really diverse group of learners, both diverse in terms of the first languages they speak, but especially in terms of their educational background. Some of them have advanced degrees from their home country, and others have little or no formal schooling before coming to the US. Good morning, let's get started. So, did you know that this year is an election year? How many of you are citizens? How many people are citizens now? Okay, so this year in November, we're going to be voting in Minnesota for a new governor, for senators, and for other state representatives. And so we're going to be talking a few different times this year about voting. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about voting history in the United States. I know many of you said you wanted to learn more US history. So we're going to learn a little bit about voting history. So first of all, who is eligible? Who is allowed to vote in the United States now?
18 years.
You have to be 18 years old. What else? You have to be a US citizen. Anything else? That's about it. Is there anybody who's not allowed to vote? Who's not allowed to vote? Right? If you don't have citizenship, you can't vote. If you're under 18, you can't vote. People who have a felony cannot vote. And sometimes they can get their right to vote back later, but at the time when they're in prison and for a while afterwards, they can't vote. So that's also part of the law. All right, good. For our warm-up this morning, I'm going to have you talk to 3 different people. Okay? As you move around and talk, number 1, introduce yourself. If it's somebody you don't know their name, introduce themselves, because we have a new student today. Okay? And then number 2, tell them what is another country where you have lived before you lived in the United States. And number 3, in that country, who is allowed to vote and who's not allowed to vote. Ready?
Yes.
All right, go ahead. Stand up, talk to 3 different people.
I've lived in Malaysia for 8 years.
8 years?
Yes. After that, I moved to the United States.
4 years or 1 year? Our president is, I think, in United States is 4 years. Yeah, and my country also. Every 4 years they vote again. Yes. How about your country?
Yeah, over 4 years.
Yes.
Every 4 years we change another president.
Yeah. Vote again, no change. Vote again. Yes.
A change another president.
No change. They make again, vote again. Then who get the most number of people?
These are some things we've been working on a lot lately. We're going to practice working together to understand new vocabulary in difficult text. So the text we're going to read today, it's a little difficult, but we're going to work together to understand the words that we don't know. We're going to work to find evidence in the text to help us answer questions. So answering the questions, but also being able to show where did I find that answer in the text. And then finally, we're going to practice talking about the specific details that we see in the text that help us understand the answers to the questions. Okay? These are our objectives for today. This is what we're going to work on learning. Any questions about those? No? All right, let's get started. When the standards first came out was about the time that I started teaching this class. And I was really struggling with what to make this class, what its focus should be. And so the standards for me were a great way to sort of think about refocusing the class. I was also hearing from more and more students that they had an interest in doing more academic work. Either they had plans to get their GED and go to college, or they knew that this was what their children were learning in school, and they wanted a sense of being able to keep up with their kids. Or in some cases, they just hadn't had access to education before, and this is what they really wanted. I started by just familiarizing myself with the standards in general, especially the reading standards at first. As I would plan lessons, I'd kind of glance back at them and see what seemed like it might fit with the things I already had planned for that lesson. Over time, the more time I spent looking at the standards, the more I got a sense of what they were all about. And after a while, you start to internalize them so that you don't have to look back at the book as much. And as you're planning, then you get a sense of, oh, I could fit this in here, or I could fit that in there. And it becomes a much more natural process. New text in just a minute. And when I do, I would like you to find the title. What is a title? Mm-hmm.
Or the name
paragraph. The name of a paragraph? It's the name of the name for the whole story. Yep, the name for the text, the name for the article, or the whole story. Where is the title usually located? Up at the top of the page. Okay, good. You'll also see that this story has a caption. This might be a new word. Does anybody know caption? Okay. A caption is a sentence or two that describes a picture. So sometimes when you're reading an article in the newspaper or in a textbook, you'll see a picture, and right under the picture or next to the picture are one or two sentences that tell you what is in this picture. What do we see in this picture? Okay? That's a caption. So I'm going to ask you to find and write caption next to the caption. And then finally, I'd like you to number the paragraphs. So count the paragraphs in the text and put a number on the left side next to each paragraph. Write the word title next to the title. Write the word caption next to the caption, and number the paragraphs.
I think. There's a picture, caption.
So the caption are the sentences that describe the picture. Yes, that part is the caption. Mm-hmm. Here, right?
Yeah.
Over time, I've been able to kind of zero in on a grade level for my class, which has been helpful because there are a lot of great K-12 resources out there that provide us with nonfiction texts and sometimes fiction texts that can easily be integrated with the topic we're already studying. In this case, we are talking about elections, and there was this nice reading on the history of women's suffrage. I usually start by searching for texts at grade level, and then once I have one that fits the grade level that I think my students are roughly at, then I'll sit down and read it myself with a really critical eye of sort of what makes this text complex. Where are the points where I go back and naturally reread? What are the grammar constructions in there that might make it more difficult? I usually have a pretty good sense of what vocabulary students are going to know or not know along the way. And there are great tools for CCRS to help you evaluate the complexity of your text. What is the title of this story, this article?
Winning the vote.
Good. Let's all say vote.
Vote.
Winning the vote.
Winning the vote.
Excellent. Where do you see the caption? Where do you see the caption?
In the middle.
The string. Under the number one. Under the number one.
Okay. Under number one is the picture. Where is the caption? Under the picture. Okay, so everybody put your finger on your paper and point to the caption. Where is it? Is the caption a picture? No. The caption are the words under the picture that give you more information about the picture. And how many paragraphs are in this story? 3 paragraphs. Is the caption part of the article? Do we count it as a paragraph?
No.
No, we don't count it as a paragraph. So we have 3 paragraphs. All right, let's look at that caption. Could I have somebody read the caption out loud, starting with thousands? Oh, come on, be brave. All right, thank you, Nai. Can you read just the second sentence where it says thousands?
Thousands of women marched in New York City for the right to vote.
Good. That word in the middle is marched. Marched. Say with me, marched.
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 What is the root word? What's the, if we take away the ed ending? March. Good. And then past tense, marched. Marched. Look at that picture. What do you think marched means? What do you think marched means? It says thousands of women marched in New York City for the right to vote.
Protest.
Aha, protest. Good. Anything else? What are they doing in this picture? They're holding signs.
And they wore the robe.
They're walking on the road.
The women want vote.
The women want to vote. What did you say, Asami?
In the sign, is they write something is later.
Right, they've written something on the signs. We can't read them in this picture, but something maybe about wanting the right to vote. All of those answers are correct. Look at your pink paper, and we're just going to practice talking about the meaning of new words. Okay? So we said marched means to walk in the road, to carry signs, to protest, to ask for something you want. We want the right to vote. I want you to turn and talk to the person next to you, and you're going to practice the first question with the word marched. What does marched mean? I think marched means, for example, you're going to tell your partner what you think it means. Okay? Go ahead with the person next to you, 2 or 3 people. Okay, I heard great answers to question number 1. So now what I want us to do is to think about that whole sentence in the caption. So look at the caption again. Thousands of women marched in New York City for the right to vote. And then we're going to ask question number 2 on your pink paper. What does this sentence mean? We know what marched means now. What does this sentence mean? So I want you to turn to your partner and tell them what it means, but you're going to try to use different words. Not just the words that are on the paper, but different words to show that you understand the meaning of the sentence. Okay? So turn to your partner. I think the sentence means, or I think the author is saying. Okay? That sentence. Thousands of women marched in New York City for the right to vote. Turn and talk to your partner again.
I think the sentence means the one man marched in the New York City protest carrying signs walking the road.
The next thing we're going to do is we're going to dig into the text and try to understand what the whole text says. And so first, I'm going to read it out loud so that you can hear the pronunciation of the new words in the text. As you listen, you might want to circle or underline words that you don't understand or important ideas or things that are new or surprising to you. Okay? So just listen and look at the text while I read aloud. Winning the vote. Imagine if boys made all the rules. That's how it was in 1776, when the United States was founded. Women were not allowed to vote until 1920. This year, 2012, is the 92nd anniversary of that important event. The women's suffrage movement began in the 1800s. Suffrage is the right to vote. To win this right, women held protests and marches. Hundreds of those women were arrested and jailed. Women's groups across the country are honoring those who fought for this right with special events throughout the year. Learning how women's actions changed America is important. It encourages us to understand that we can make a better world, said Molly Murphy McGregor, the president of the National Women's History Project. So what we're going to do next is we're going to get into small groups and work through the text one paragraph at a time. As you work, I'd like you to use your pink paper to help you think about first, what does the word mean, if it's a new word that you don't know. And then after you talk about the meaning of the word, you're going to think about the sentence. What does the whole sentence mean with that word in it? And finally, I'd like you to practice how can you show the meaning of that sentence or word. So on your pink paper, what are some of the ways that you can show the meaning of the word or sentence?
Draw an image.
Draw a picture.
Image in the phone.
An image in your phone.
A dictionary.
A dictionary definition. Okay, let's talk about not just how to find the meaning, but once you understand it, how can you show the meaning?
Maybe draw.
Maybe draw. Find a good picture that illustrates it. Or the other thing that I see you do all the time is like act it out. Okay? Use your hands. Use other things to help you explain the meaning of the text. Step one is what does the word mean? When we're looking for the meaning of the word, what are some different ways that we can find the meaning of a word? Pani, what's one way we can find the meaning of a new word?
We can find a dictionary.
Dictionary. I put some dictionaries on the windowsill back there. You can feel free to take them. There's also more on the bookshelf. Good. Yeah, what's another way that we can find the meaning of a new word?
Ask teacher.
Yes, you can ask me. Okay, so that's fine. If you've talked together and you've looked in the dictionary and you still don't understand, you can use me as a resource. Geber-Kinan, what's another way?
Act.
So that's going to help us once we know it and we want to tell someone else. What if we don't know what the word means? How can we find the meaning of the word? We can use a dictionary. Yeah, you can use a translator. So you can use your phone as a translator. What else? Ask your friend. Search for a picture. Yep. Especially if it's a noun, that might be helpful. With verbs and adjectives, it's more difficult. But when you look at the pictures, you'll need to decide, does this help me understand the meaning of the word, or maybe not? Okay? It's a good idea to use more than one way to find the meaning of the word. If you look at more than one way and they seem to agree, and it makes sense in the sentence, then you have a good definition. I spent a lot of time thinking about what do good readers do, and reading about what do good readers do. And vocabulary is definitely one part of it. We can't ignore it, especially for English language learners. They tell me it's the vocabulary. That's why I don't understand this. And so that's usually where we start. I want them to be able to have tools for uncovering the meanings of new words And that includes not just dictionaries, but translators from their first language. I want them to be able to maybe find an image using an online search that might help them really get a concrete idea of a certain noun. And I want them to be able to choose from those strategies and use them effectively. Then once they've got the meaning of the word, I want them to be able to apply it to the text and see how does that meaning impact the meaning of this sentence, and how does that sentence impact the meaning of this larger text. Once students have those vocabulary tools, then I'm looking at the other things that I know that I do as a good reader. Right? As I'm reading, I stop, and if I get confused or I'm not sure what that last paragraph said, I'm monitoring that, and I know that I need to go back and reread that and break it down. I want students to develop that same level of self-monitoring. So we do a lot of things when they're working in small groups where I ask them to read a paragraph aloud, talk together about any vocabulary you don't understand in there, and then take turns covering the paragraph and trying to paraphrase it, say it in different words. And that takes a lot of practice, but when students know alternate meanings for the vocabulary words, they're better prepared to paraphrase. And when they can paraphrase, they can start to monitor their own understanding. Because if you can't paraphrase the text, there's a decent chance that you don't truly understand the text. I will be listening in your groups for everybody talking. Okay, so work together to make sure that everybody participates. I'll be listening for you using the sentences on your pink paper. And please make sure that you understand paragraph 1 very well before you start on paragraph 2. Okay? Make sure you have a very strong understanding of paragraph 1, then move to paragraph 2, and then paragraph 3.
How about that you see that this one, women groups across the countries are honoring those who fought for this right. What does mean the honoring? Honoring, I don't know, you know?
What does honoring mean?
Yeah,
yes.
This one.
No.
You don't know? You find the dictionary?
Please.
Honoring es como honorando. It's honoring is like a high respect.
Huh?
Respect.
Respect. Oh, yeah. It's respect.
Because the women's work across the country, they are marching and they got honoring.
Those
they fought for their rights.
Oh, the woman is they protest and matches.
They march and they got the same rights for the men and the women.
What is mean?
Honor?
Yes.
It's like just high respect.
Oh, respect.
Respect to keep an agreement.
Oh, respect is. Oh, I think it's the honoring me is nicely. Nice. Respect is.
Yeah, respect.
Honor is respect is the marching is a rule.
Separate to both
I can help you.
Okay.
I choose the person and this is put in the box.
Put in the box.
Yeah. Suppose like this. Like this. This. And choose the person, the name, and this put in the box. Suppose meaning.
The right to vote.
Yeah, to vote.
Yeah. It's you know, for example, over 18 and women's and men's, everybody has to vote. Vote.
Walk.
Vote.
Vote.
Mhm.
Yes, you can vote.
Vote.
Okay.
Can you make a sentence?
You can make.
Yeah, I think.
You make.
Yeah, me.
What does the suffrage mean?
I think the suffrage means people have right to vote.
Yeah, so
For example,
what's important here, held is another way to say to have something.
men and women over the 18, they can
Have a
vote.
class, you can hold a class.
That's a good question. Why do you think they were arrested?
Because they march, protest, make a protest. They was
But to win this right, why they are right and jail.
So to win this right, does it mean that they did win the right, or they were working to win the right? They're working to win the right, so they don't have the right. When they hold protests and marches, they are trying to win the right. Remember we talked about when we use these infinitive verbs, like to win, to go, it's often to tell the purpose. Why did they hold protests and marches? To win the right to vote. Okay, so go back, Domitila, you were saying, why do you think they were arrested and jailed?
Why? Because they make a woman make a protest.
And are people arrested sometimes when they protest?
Yeah, when they make
Productive struggle is this idea that it's okay for things to be difficult, for them to take some time, and that a big part of the learning happens when students have to struggle, try again, come up with a new strategy, maybe use some new resources or knowledge from other students or teachers in order to get at what they are trying to accomplish. When I'm planning a lesson, the first part is I have to plan for that productive struggle, which usually means that I need to plan a lot more time. That a reading lesson is going to take a lot more time because students need time to read a text multiple times. They need time to maybe consult resources like a dictionary or a website. And they need time to discuss and try again and try again and try again. So that's part of the planning process. And then as it's happening, it's also a bit of, you know, as a teacher, learning to sort of sit on your hands, or in this case, keep your mouth closed. Long enough for them to have time to really put their thoughts together and try. And then when they don't get it right, to be careful not to jump in with the correct answer right away, or even to lead them too directly to the answer. It's a strategy that I've developed over time. It wasn't easy at first, of being able to question students along the way, thinking about the various steps of understanding that they need to get to this larger answer. So I might, if I see that they're struggling with understanding a particular paragraph, I might start by looking at what are the most difficult vocabulary words in there and start questioning them about, do you know what this word means? Have you looked it up? What did your dictionary say about it? How does that help you understand that sentence? And then once I feel like they've got the vocabulary words, then I might look at the next thing that I think makes that sentence complex and then ask them specific questions about that. So I'm also helping them break down the task through my guiding questions. And then the last part is encouragement. Students who aren't used to working in an environment of productive struggle need a lot of encouragement in order to build up their tolerance of that productive struggle. And so in this lesson, students spent a long time in these small groups struggling with the vocabulary. They haven't always been able to do that. That was stamina that we had to build up over time as they learned that it was okay to not know the right answer right away, to guess at it, to talk about it, to circle around it and use different resources and eventually get there. But that the learning comes from doing something difficult. And so I also try to be a cheerleader to let them know that that's part of the process and that's how they're going to get stronger at reading.
So I think that's a great summary of paragraph 2. Right? The women's groups decided together that they wanted to earn the right to vote, and so they protested and marched. Now look at paragraph 3. Is it in past tense or present tense?
Present.
Present tense. Why is paragraph 3 in present tense?
Because they're when they fought for the rights, they win.
They won, right?
They won.
And so what are women doing now?
And now the women change American.
Uh-huh.
And now they can vote.
Right, so now they can vote. So now let's, if we're thinking about that, let's read this first sentence again. I'll read it out loud. Women's groups across the country are honoring those who fought for this right with special events throughout the year. So we're talking about now. What are we doing now? What are the women's groups doing now?
Now everybody can vote, and we can make a better world, and we can show if you can vote for this president or another president, you feel free.
I agree with you. Does it say that here?
No.
No. Yeah, so we have to come back and say, what is this trying to tell us about women's groups now? Okay, so when we talk about honoring, did you look up the word honoring in your dictionary?
Honor.
And honor. Okay, that's fine. Honor is the root word. And what did it tell you about honor? What does it say honor means?
It's had the respect.
Respect. Yeah. Okay, so women's groups across the country are honoring, so right now, those who fought for this right. So who are we showing respect for?
The woman, group of women.
The women's groups, when?
When they protect and merchants.
Yeah.
At that time.
So, go ahead.
They don't broke a rule. They respect to follow the rule.
Who respects to follow a rule?
The government. Oh no, the women.
Which women? Women now or women in the past?
Women in the past. Oh no,
No.
in the past. That years ago.
They don't say who.
Right, so, okay, so women's groups across the country, we're talking about now, are honoring those who fought. Is this present tense or past tense?
Past.
Past. Those who fought for this right. Who fought for the right to vote in the past?
Women.
A woman.
These women group, right? Like the ones in the pictures. So, the women today want to honor and respect the women in the past who worked hard to get the right to vote.
So that time is women group is the challenges challenges to get to vote.
Yes.
Right vote.
Big challenges.
Yeah, big challenges.
Okay. And so it says, what are we going to do to honor them? With special events throughout the year. What do you think that means?
Because that year is the present, they get the vote people.
What year are we talking about? Are we talking now in the past or in the present?
Past, 1920.
Yeah, this sentence is hard because it sort of has a little bit of past and a little bit of present in both. I'm going to read the whole sentence again together. Women's groups across the country, is that now or past?
No.
Now, are honoring those who fought for this right, past, with special events throughout the year.
Present.
Present. Here we're talking about we're going to do something throughout the year. What are special events?
They can do special is the win, it's just special.
What's an event?
Event. All the time.
Okay, it's a time thing. A special event is another way to say a party or celebration or a speech or something that you invite many people to come and do with you. A special event. So if you have a special event at your church or temple, you invite a lot of people to come to that special thing to celebrate with you.
Wedding day.
A wedding day is a special event.
Event that we make people come to a party or...
Right.
Yes.
Event is just something that happened, but a special event is like a party, a celebration, something we want people to come and participate in. What do you think? A little difficult? Yeah. Okay, very difficult. How does this text feel to you right now? Difficult to understand. Yeah. Yeah, it's not very long, but it's a little bit complicated, a little difficult. So we're going to do something else that I think will help you. But I want to just say, as I'm walking around to each group, I really like what I hear. You're working together. You're really thinking about what it means, not just reading and then going to the next part. You're really trying to understand and to work together to talk about your ideas. So don't worry if it feels difficult, right? Doing difficult things is what helps us to learn and improve. If I give you easy things to do every day, then you don't learn anything. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about these words which appear in this story several times. This, that, these, and those. So when you were in ESL level 2, 3, you might have practiced like this marker, that marker, right? These papers, those papers. But in your stories, the way they use this, that, these, and those is a little more complicated. As you become more familiar with the standards, you start to see opportunities where you can take different standards and weave them together. Maybe a speaking and listening standard with a reading standard or a language standard. For example, one of the things that makes text complex, especially for English language learners, is often the grammar of the sentences. When you start to get longer, more complex sentences that might even incorporate multiple grammar tenses, then that's also confounding their understanding of the text a lot of times. It's not just the vocabulary. In this lesson, as I was reading through the text in preparation for teaching it, I noticed a lot of grammar points that I thought were going to really be barriers to understanding the text. And so I decided to weave in a sort of grammar lesson around these language topics. And they line up with the language standards. So it's really about analyzing the text that you're working with and then looking for opportunities to bring in the other standards that relate to that text. We want to remember this and that we use for singular items. And these and those we use for plural items, more than one. When you see a word like this in your story, you need to think about what are they talking about? What is this? What is that? In the same way that when we see it in a story, we need to think about, wait, go back, what is it? So let's do some examples. Selma wants to read well. To practice this skill, she reads with her children. To practice this skill, she reads with her children. What is this skill?
Reading.
Reading. Good. So I'm going to make a little arrow here to help me remember that this skill is reading. Today's temperature is only 2 degrees. That is normal for winter in Minnesota. That is normal for winter in Minnesota. What is that talking about?
Temperature.
The temperature. Good. These. Pizza and chips taste good, but these are not nutritious foods. These are not nutritious foods. What is these?
Pizza.
Good. Pizza and chips. And those. Those who use cell phones while driving make our roads more dangerous. This one's a little harder. What is those?
Those cell phones.
People.
But
People.
Not here, people. The subject not here.
Right.
Yeah, the subject.
Yeah, okay, good. Good. So she's right? It doesn't say people in here, but we're talking about people who use cell phones. But the clue is here. Who? Because who is a word that we use to talk about people. Okay? So those who use cell phones means people who use cell phones. All right? So we're going to do some practice now. I'm going to give you some red pens. And with your red pens, I'd like you to find in your text where you see this, that, these, and those. And then use the red pen to draw an arrow or write in what is it talking about. So I'm going to read it out loud. Listen and see if you can connect the two ideas. Imagine if boys made all the rules. That's how it was in 1776, when the United States was founded. That's how it was. What is how it was? How was it?
In 2017.
What was it like in 1776?
Founded.
How was life different in 1776, according to this sentence?
Women were not allowed.
Well, it doesn't say that yet. What does it tell us?
Oh, boys made all the rules.
Boys made all the rules, right? Or men. Right? Not really boys, but men made all the rules. That's how it was in 1776. So that is referring back to boys made all the rules. Let's talk a little bit about some of the examples that you found. I saw most people had 3 in the paragraph 1, right? Did you find 3 in paragraph 1? Yes? Okay, let's talk about those. Imagine if boys made all the rules. That's how it was in 1776 when the United States was founded. That's how it was. What are we talking about, that?
Boys made all the rules.
Boys made all the rules, right? Or men, really, right? This article is probably written for children because it uses boys instead of men. But yeah, men made all the rules. So they're saying, was life the same in 1776 as it is now? No, right? It was very different. And one difference is that men or boys made all the rules. So when we say that's how it was, we mean life where boys made all the rules. Okay. Then in the third sentence, this year 2012 is the 92nd anniversary of that important event. This year, what year are we talking about? 2012. So that tells us this article is a little old, right? It's several years old, but at the time it was written, it was 2012. So draw an arrow to 2012. It's the 92nd anniversary of that important event. What important event are we talking about? Women are not allowed to vote? Is that an important event we would want to celebrate? And, yeah, go ahead, yeah. Say that again.
The women have equal rights like men.
Right, women get equal rights to vote. And what year did that happen? 1920. 1920, women got the right to vote. So that is the important event that we're celebrating. Suffrage is the right to vote. To win this right, women held protests and marches. This right, what right are we talking about?
Vote.
The right to vote. So you should have an arrow going back to the right to vote. Yeah. To win this right, we're talking about the right to vote. Hundreds of those women were arrested and jailed. Which women were arrested and jailed? Hundreds, but which women? Did all the women get arrested? No. Which women got arrested and jailed? Yeah, Pele, can you say that again? Marches, right? The women who went to the marches and protests were sometimes arrested and jailed. So where it says those women, draw an arrow back to women held protests and marches. The third one is using that in a different way. Let's talk about the first two though. Women's groups across the country are honoring those who fought for this right. Those who fought for this right. Who is those referring to? So where it says those, either write in women or draw an arrow back to women who held protests and marches. Yeah, it's not the women's groups across the country, because women's groups across the country is talking about women's groups today. The right to vote. Okay, so this right, you might just write in vote. You don't have to use an arrow. Sometimes it's easier to just write it in. Yep, you can just write vote. Let's try some of the questions that come with this text. So turn the page and find the first question. Okay, good. Asami, could you read question number 1 out loud for us?
When did the
Suffrage
movement begin?
Good. When did the women's suffrage movement begin? So now go back to your text, and you should all have a highlighter on the table. Can you find the evidence? When did the women's suffrage movement begin? Highlight that evidence. What evidence you found to answer question 1?
Paragraph 2.
All right. Paragraph 2. So Sansamik, can you tell us in paragraph 2?
In paragraph 2, he said the women's suffrage movement began in the 1800s.
Good. So we know, if I look at my answers, so we know B is correct because B says 1800s. Yeah. That one is pretty easy. It's right there.
We use sentence frames a lot in my class, and especially when I know that I want them to do a more academic task that they may not be accustomed to. Because even the students who come from backgrounds where they had more academic training before coming here, it usually wasn't the type that we think of where they might have small group discussions or be expected to sort of give lengthy oral answers to a question. So for most of them, I think at times when I ask questions like, show me the evidence for your answer, they don't have an idea of where to begin, what that's supposed to sound like. And so the sentence frame is also a way of modeling for them what type of language I expect. And then gradually we're able to remove that sentence frame. But it helps set the expectation for what they need and take away a little bit of the linguistic work of creating those answers.
Now let's try number 2. Let's see. Domitila, would you read question number 2 for us?
How does the author introduce the idea of women's
Suffrage. Suffrage. How does the author introduce the idea of women's suffrage? Let's just review. What does introduce mean? Tell you. And tell you again and again and again? No. If I introduce myself to you, it means this is the first time that we met. Okay? And when we introduce an idea, it's the first time that we talk about that idea in the text. Okay? So where should we look in the text for the author introducing the idea of women's suffrage? Do you think that will be near the beginning or near the end? Near the beginning. Okay, so take a look in paragraph 1. How does the author introduce the idea of women's suffrage? And now I think this one, instead of so we know, this is an inference question. So we're going to put so I think. So what do you think about the author introducing the idea? Anybody else want to add to that? Okay, so Iba thinks the answer might be D. Can you tell me more?
I think number D.
Because?
Because by asking readers to imagine what life was like before women's suffrage.
Suffrage, good. And where do you see the evidence for that in the text?
In paragraph 1.
Mm-hmm. This one is harder.
Of the suffrage. Paragraph 2.
So let's help Iba. She's found the right answer. D is correct by asking readers to imagine what life was like before women's suffrage. Where does the author do that? Where does the author ask readers to imagine how life was before?
The boys made the law, or the rule.
Good. Okay, so Asami, tell us where to find the evidence.
In paragraph 1, imagine.
It says.
It says, imagine if boys made all the rules.
Good. Imagine if boys made all the rules. Is that the same as answer D?
Yes, similar.
Yes, they're similar, right? It's not the same words, but it's similar. This is the author introducing the idea. Before they tell us all the information, they want us to think about, how was that? How was life different at that time? In your group, work on question number 3, and then go back to the text and use your highlighter to show where you found the evidence for that answer. Okay? We've got about 3 minutes.
When did women protest for the right to vote?
Which one?
Some different dates there. Make sure you know which things happened in each state.
Where you found it?
In your group, talk about your answer for question number 3 using these phrases. Talk about the evidence. Where did you find the evidence in the text to help you answer question 3? Okay? Talk about it in your group.
This one number 2. Number 2. In paragraph 2, it says, imagine if boy met all the rules. In paragraph 3, it says
Question 3.
In question 3.
Question 3.
In question 3, it says.
Okay, I see. So first you want to talk about the question and what answer you chose. So you'd say, question 3, I chose C because
The paragraph says. Because the paragraph 1 says the women were not allowed to vote.
That's right. There you go. Good. Very nice.
When I started implementing the CCRS standards was also about the time that we started shifting away from life skills more. One, because it seemed like that was what was needed at the time for most of the learners, not all of the learners, but most of the learners in the class. And also because the standards lend themselves to working on nonfiction texts and more complex texts. So I think what that has resulted in is there's been a lot of positive reinforcement from the students saying, we love learning about, the systems of the body, and we love learning this US history information, and these are the things that we've always wanted to learn. For the students who came in the door saying, I just want to be able to talk to my neighbor, or I just don't want it to be so difficult when I go to the doctor's office, what I'm seeing is that their overall communication skills are rising as they practice things like being able to express their ideas about complex topics and interesting topics, and as they learn how to paraphrase and come up with different words than the word maybe that they were searching for as they were trying to speak. Now they have a variety of words and strategies for circumlocution and paraphrasing that they can apply to all those different life skills scenarios. So it does mean that I have to always make sure that I'm balancing the speaking and listening skills with the reading and writing skills. It can be really easy, especially if you're planning a lesson about a text, to really focus on reading skills. And I want to make sure that students spend a lot of time talking with each other about the text so that they're also getting a lot of practice with their speaking and listening skills at the same time. Overall, I feel like the engagement level is really high in this material, especially when we're choosing meaty topics that do relate to our lives. We all have a human body, so learning about human body systems is fascinating to everybody, whether or not you ever plan to go on to a medical career. I am choosy about the topics that I choose because I want them to have relevance and interest to everybody, but with those, there's a lot of rich work that we can do. We've spent time talking about water quality. We've spent time talking about Native American history. We've spent time talking about civics and government and elections. And all those things offer a wide variety of both listening and speaking texts that we can bring into the classroom.